Good afternoon, all. Good to see you. Some people are still coming in, so we'll just give it 2 more minutes before we kick off. Okay, I think we'll make a start. So welcome to the webinar Circular Business Models, which is the third in a series of NICER programme webinars introducing some of the key cross-cutting areas of importance to accelerating and scaling the circular economy. My name is Fiona Charnley, and alongside Professor Peter Hopkinson, I am co-director of the Circular Economy Hub. We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers to introduce you to today, but before we start, I wanted to just go over some points of housekeeping. So we are recording this event and it will be made available via the CE Hub's website, but if you do not wish to be included in the recording, please keep your cameras off. If you could keep your microphones on mute while the speakers are speaking, that would be appreciated. But any questions that you do wish to ask our speakers, please pop into the chat box either during the presentations or feel free to come online during the Q&A, which will be at the towards the end of the session once all of the presenters have spoken. So I just wanted to tell you a bit about the programme for those of you who don't already know. So the National Interdisciplinary Circular Economy Research Programme is the largest UKRI investment to date, focusing on accelerating and upscaling circular economy research innovation. The £30 million investment is split across 5 national circular economy research centres, each of which focuses on a particular resource flow, as you'll see on this slide, and then that's coordinated by an integrating circular economy hub, which aims to scale and add value to the programme as a whole, and also reach out beyond the programme to build up that national and international circular economy community. So the programme also includes £2.5 million worth of Innovate UK funding, which focuses on SME research and development, which some of you may have already applied for. And importantly, the programme is supported by all UK research councils and also has significant involvement from the policy community, including DEFRA, BEIS and other devolved administrations. So it's a 4-year programme that was launched in January this year, and it brings together academics, industrialists, policymakers and wider society with a key aim of accelerating and upscaling the UK's transition towards a more circular and regenerative economy. So as many of you will undoubtedly appreciate, circular economy business models play a key role in our transition towards circularity, and we're starting to see many different examples of circular business models in practice. And so we've got some fantastic speakers lined up this afternoon who are going to present on the area of circular economy business models from an academic and also an industrial and policy perspective, trying to understand kind of what some of these challenges look like and what the successes have been. So we'll first hear from Marina Peroni from Aalborg University in Denmark, who will share her perspectives about her research and practical experience from implementing circular business models across a wide variety of different sectors. We'll then hear from Bing Zhu from Heriot-Watt University, who will share some of the work that she is doing on circular business models within the context of the circular chemicals economy. I'm just getting a bit of background noise, so I would appreciate it if you could keep your microphones on mute if possible. Then after Bing, we'll hear from Phil Hawkins from RICO about the implementation of circular business models in practice. And then he will be followed by Greg Lavery, CEO of Ripe Office, to share some insights into the development of circular business models within the context of the furniture sector. So each of our speakers is going to talk for about 7 minutes to try and allow time for Q&A and discussion towards the end of the session. So please, as I mentioned, do pop your Q&A in the chat and we'll have a discussion towards the end. So I want to hand over now to Marina, who has over 5 years experience of researching and collaborating on the topic of circular economy business models, and she's hopefully going to set the scene for us. So over to you, Marina.
Thanks, Fiona, for the invite and the opportunity to open up and set the scene. And I would like to share some insights from my research experience regarding circular business models, including what they are, how they could look like, and why they usually succeed or fail. If I could have the next slide, please. Before we go into circular business models, always good to align what is a business model. So a business model is explains how the logic of how a business works. And usually it's very focused on the value that it tries to capture, exchange or create, and how it creates that value and to whom it creates that value. Usually on the right side, you see the business model canvas, which is one easy to use and well known to represent how the logic of business works. If I could have the next slide, please. We then come to the concept of a circular business model. And what is a circular business model? And to talk about a circular one, let's first think about what is a linear one. So a linear business model very much focus on the traditional way of doing things, which we all know here in the circular economy space, the phrase take, make, dispose. So the business is very much looking forward into creating value by fulfilling the customer needs, and as well very much focusing on economic growth usually. In the circular business model, all those characteristics are also kept, also true, but there is a big difference, which is the driver of a business in trying to do superior customer value, trying to create economic growth while keeping resource longevity or resource efficiency. So making and creating better value, if one could say, by using less, using for resources for a longer period of times and using again. And I quite much like this very elegant representation on the right bottom side by one of my colleagues, Jen Konietzko, which in my opinion represents what a business model is about. It's about creating value through the products, components, and materials while narrowing loops, slowing loops, or closing loops, with the ultimate intent for the business to avoid the creation of waste, or to minimize the creation of waste and emissions as a consequence, and as well minimize the intake of virgin resource materials as much as possible. If I could have the next slide, please. We touched upon already by looking at narrowing loops, slowing loops, or closing loops at different ways or different hows that a circular business model could be approached. There are many configurations that one company could approach to become circular. And sometimes it will be not only about one company. Probably it will be many companies collaborating to create a complete circular business model. But in the research conducted, we could identify from literature and practice that more than 20 ways could be possible. Just to give some examples, for instance, to slow loops, we are talking very much about providing products as services, or the sharing models and concepts. To closed loops, we'd be talking very much about all sorts of businesses focusing on trading byproducts or end-use resources and putting them back in the same loop or outer loops, like industrial symbiosis and so forth. And to narrow loops, we would be talking more about digital enabled platforms or business models that will enable efficiency and so forth. If I could have the next slide. And then if you could click 3 times, so we make it, yeah, that's perfect, thank you. So this is an example of a company. It is an SME, Norwegian SME from a furniture manufacturer, and it shows how they used or evolved from a certain circular business model to others. For instance, they started and created a product that was very circular, focused on modular furniture, for lasting longer times, and to be able to be assembled and disassembled more than 20 times. However, they realized that to seize fully the capacity of that product to last longer, they would have to engage differently with the customers. So instead of selling, it would be necessary to provide packages of services to help the customers to slow the loops or close the loops. So they stopped selling furnitures and became a company that provides office or home workspaces as a service and pop-up shops as a service. They also realized that it was important to start working with the concept of closing loops to investigate new sources of materials. For certain parts they have in the product still plastic-based. So they related with the value chain in a way to develop recycled plastic flows. If I could have a next slide. And then we talked about what, how, and now why. Why do business models usually succeed or fail? Was it easy for UPE to start the journey to become more circular in their business model? No, it was not. Usually there are many pitfalls. Actually, by data from OECD, only 5 to 10% of revenues from manufacturing companies are coming from data from 2018 from circular business models. So there probably are many pitfalls. From research, we see that some of the pitfalls are exemplified in the bubbles there, but we can see that mainly they lie on that circular business models are still perceived as or relevant to niche markets, and still there is a perception of low status of the products and the service being provided with the reuse or recycled contents that is more relevant to certain cultures and countries than others. There's also a huge gap in the capabilities and the infrastructure available for organizations and for the industry or society as a whole. And if we can jump to the next slide and the final one, a way to turn that around, or 3 key points that were success criteria for UPE to perceive when they were implementing their circular business model. First of all, was to experiment and implement multiple value propositions. So we saw that they had 3 value propositions for 3 different customer segments. Then it was fundamental to establish alliances with companies within furniture industry and beyond, and even to dare to create new entities. They created a company called Ugori to work with the recycled plastic flows in Norway. And basically, it was very important to redesign the value chain. So it's much more than only companies' business models, but the whole value chain. With that, I hope I provided enough insights for a warm-up for a discussion in the panel, and I'm looking forward to the questions. Thanks a lot. Back to Fiona.
Thank you very much, Marina. It's really fascinating to see kind of how many different circular business model archetypes there are. It'll be interesting to see kind of how many of those map on, to our other speakers, particularly when we're looking at those that are actually being applied. And particularly, it's really fascinating to see the types of challenges that are coming out, and we've certainly seen a lot of those across the different organisations that we work with. So thank you, that's a fantastic job of setting the scene. And I'm now going to hand over to Bing Xu. So Bing is an associate professor of finance at Heriot-Watt University, and her background and research actually focuses on banking and investment analytical models, but she's involved in many different UKRI funded research projects, and probably the one that's most relevant to this discussion is her work with the Centre for Circular Chemical Economy, and I think she's going to discuss that a bit with us today. So thank you very much, Bing, over to you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Many thanks for the invitation and introduction, Fiona. Thanks very much. And so yeah, it is my great pleasure to be here today to share some of our recent works and around circular business models that we have been carried out in our Circular Chemical Economy Center. So next slide, please. Yeah, so some of the key questions that we're interested in finding out are how does become circular affect the business models, and for example, what are the impact on the revenues and cost structure, and what are the environmental and society benefits, for example. And then the next question is around what motivated the business and to engage with the circular practices and what preventing them to do so. And we're also interested in finding out what are the interconnectedness and interdependencies among stakeholders. So we've designed our study through multiple case studies. And for each case study that will identify our focal company with a signature circular product and chase out the key stakeholders within business ecosystems. So next slide, please. So our very first case study is around Unilever's detergent made from industrial carbon emissions. So the value chain starts with the ethanol provider, which is a joint venture between Beijing Saogang Steel and LanzaTech. So the steel manufacturer produces steel. At the same time, they also generate significant amount of industrial emissions, which is a waste to them. LanzaTech, on the other hand, has an innovative technology who can capture and convert carbon monoxide into ethanol. So by working together, they have a great business model by turning waste in the steel manufacture into a valuable input or feedstock into another sector, and also provide a tailored solution to their customers. So due to their unique value proposition, they will be able to sell their product at a premium and also capture a lion's share of the value within the ecosystem. We also believe that they have also acted as a catalyst and that accelerate the transition into the circular economy. So once the ethanol has been produced in China, it will then be shipped into India, a company called India Glycols, to produce a surfactant. So although they are an essential piece of the puzzle, their position is replaceable. It is also not ideal to have to ship from China to India, then back to China. So obviously it would be better to source locally. So far, Unilever, they have manufactured 3 carbon-based products. So the laundry capsule in China, the laundry liquid in Germany, and washing liquid in South Africa. So it is a first-of-a-kind initiative. Obviously, they prove the concept, it is doable. It also provides positive corporate social responsibility, and they have their market-leading position in the sector. It is, however, not yet a viable business case and due to very high production cost and transition risks. So obviously, the distributor also plays a role here. We're very interested in finding out from retailers and procurement perspective, for example, to what extent and their interest in selling and promoting circular products as their contribution to the environment and the society at large. Unilever has tested their carbon-based products in 3 different markets, and they all of them have received very positive feedbacks from the end users. However, they they haven't yet charged the premium to their customers. And so to what extent the end users are willing to pay the premium remains unknown. So once the detergent has been used, and obviously the users can recycle the packaging, which will be important feedstocks, and as today's packaging could be tomorrow's ethanol. So the detergent itself, it will go to the drain once it has been consumed, and obviously the water company will have to deal with them. So we've discussed them with one SME and Scottish Water. So they think the biggest win are potentially around wastewater to grow microalgae and the sludges and to generate biofuels. So obviously some of the key barriers to scale out productions are including the cost, and is the key. The process needs to be optimized, and the cost would have to be minimized to an acceptable level of the profit created along the value chain. At the moment, and it is not. And so it will be very interesting to find out the minimal selling price from Unilever's point of view to scale up their production. And the other thing is there is a need to have a fair distribution of the value being captured within the ecosystem. Currently, obviously, most of the value being captured, both financially and sustainably, have been kept in the technology side. And we also need to have more suppliers entering the market as well. So next slide, please. So to finish my presentation, we know the circular economy is a complex system with wicked problems, and we also know that we cannot wait for the stars to align naturally. We need to help them to align by looking at the big picture and identify areas that require policy, regulation, and incentives, interventions, and also understand how to create and capture values by advancing circularity. We also need to facilitating a fair distribution of financial flows within the business ecosystems and continuing innovations on technologies and changing perceptions and behaviors. And next slide, please. So thank you very much. And this is my, I think this is the end of my presentation, and this is my contact details and our center's details as well. So please do get in touch, and if you're interested in some of our work, and we look forward to sharing our research progress over the next few years. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bing. It's really thought-provoking to see the loss and creation of value across a specified value chain, and also the important role of policy and consumer acceptance within that. And I think we're probably going to hear more about that from Phil and Greg this afternoon. So many thanks, Bing. So I'm now going to hand over to Phil. And Phil is the General Manager within the Business Management Division at Ricoh UK, and has worked tirelessly with suppliers across the value chain for a number of years to develop and scale circular business at Ricoh. And this afternoon he's going to share some of these experiences, probably the good, the bad and the ugly, with us today. So thank you very much, Phil. Over to you.
Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, just briefly, guys, I work for a large company. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment. Looking after remanufacturing business. I'll explain a little bit about how we do it, and then a couple of slides on some of the challenges around it. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. Fiona, thank you. So you can read this yourself. I'm not going to read it to you. The point is that Ricoh is a very large global corporation, which means we have lots of assets. We also have lots of liabilities. So those bring both pros and cons to trying to operate a circular business model. Next slide, please. So we're a very diversified business. We're in lots of different markets and products. Primarily what I'm talking about today is the printing and the office automation area of our business. This is where our most advanced circular business models are. But what's important to me in this dialogue is that Ricoh is an original equipment manufacturer and distributor. So what that means is we have to take liability and responsibility for everything related to our brand, from a safety perspective to a compliance perspective, etc. So if we could go to the next slide, Fiona, if we may. When I'm thinking about how to practice a circular business on a global scale, then I have to consider, or the team I work with, we have to consider so many different elements to the business model, quite apart from the fact that it has to be profitable, because RICO is a commercial entity, we have to make profit. You can see there are so many potential challenges we need to think about, because if our circular business, which is very small in RICO, it's less than 8% of our total. If our circular business practice damages our entire business reputation in any way, then that would be incredibly damaging for the company. So those are the types of things that we need to think about when we're practicing circular business. So if we could go on to the next slide, just a little bit, excuse me, about the types of things we do. So this is RICO's model of circularity, and it fits in with Mariana's long loop model, I think, in principle. So you can see we've been doing this, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, since 1994, so a long time that we've been practicing this model. What you can see in essence, the green loops are the green spheres are vertically integrated elements of our company. The light blue loops are very close alliances we have, and then as we get out to the darker blue loops, effectively we're working with suppliers at long distance within our supply chain. In principle, what you can see is we manufacture virgin products in the first instance. We sell them through our own sales organizations, and we try to keep them in use as long as we possibly can through maintenance. When we can't maintain them any longer, we'll bring them back through our own product recovery centers, and we'll either remanufacture them or we'll strip them for parts use, etc. When we get to the stage where that's not viable, we then start looking at, is there a way for the materials in them to be recovered, etc., etc. And ultimately, what we say within RICO, and if you were to go on any RICO website, rico.com is the global site, you will see that RICO practices zero to landfill, which is very easy to say and very difficult to do when you're selling millions of products all over the world every day. We don't necessarily have control of all of those products all the time. So from a brand risk perspective, it's a big challenge for us. And this comment circle is the way that we try to, we practice our circular business model. So if we could go to the next slide. Behind that, we have a process by which we basically cascade assets. So it's a process based on a network and on knowledge, and it's about understanding the condition of assets in the marketplace so we can decide before we even collect them out of the marketplace what's the best thing to do with them. And you can see there, we might centrally recondition them, remanufacture them, we might do it within a marketplace, we might harvest parts, we might export to other regions within RICO, global regions, etc. So we have a whole process which kind of underpins our business model. And if we can go to the next slide, just a very simple explanation of how fragile this business is when you're trying to run it as a profitable business. This is a real simple explanation. This is a RICO toner bottle. We recycle that toner bottle, we bring it back and we reuse it. You can see it's got a number of components within it. I'm talking about the bottle, not the black powder inside it. We don't recycle the toner because the toner is consumed by the user. But if we go to the next slide, you'll see how fragile the economics of that are. So you can basically see there what is in effect a bill of material and a costing for both a virgin bottle when we produce it first time at €1.24 and a reuse bottle at €1.14. And the reason I wanted to bring this example to your attention is we are a very well established manufacturer. We're very good at this stuff, to be frank. You know, it's not so challenging for us to do it. Technically, it's relatively straightforward. We have all of the infrastructure to do it. But the one element of our reuse model that is completely out of our control is the recovery cost, which is the cost of sorting and transport. And if you look at that example there, 70 euro cents of the €1.14 is actually out of our control. And therefore, we can very easily tip that 10-cent differential into actually a negative situation. And because we run this collection scheme globally, we can't just turn it on and off. It's a long-term commitment to do this. So the economics of this can be very fragile, and if you get it wrong, you can really put yourself into a difficult position. So that was my 7 minutes worth, I think. Just very, very brief. I could talk about it for 7 hours.
Brilliant.
I look forward to some questions.
Thanks, Phil. I'm sure you will get the opportunity to elaborate on that, as we've received quite a lot of questions. But it's really valuable to see how some of the theory that Marina presented us with is being applied in practice, and also all of the factors that have to be taken into account alongside cost and profit. We've had quite a few questions around cost and profit, and so it's really useful to see some of the figures that are associated with the RECO model, and perhaps we can go into that in a bit more detail during the chat. So thanks, Phil. I'm now going to move on to our final speaker, Greg Lavery. So Greg has a background in engineering and gained a PhD in sustainable buildings before he put that knowledge into practice when he founded Ripe Office several years ago now. And looking at Greg's LinkedIn profile, it did make me chuckle that he shouldn't be confused with the other Greg Lavery, who is a party poker legend. So I don't think we're going to be discussing too much poker this afternoon, but over to you, Greg.
No, not my field at all. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. So next slide, please. Let's hop into it. I'm not going to dwell on the linear model that exists in furniture at the moment, and we're talking office furniture here. Suffice to say that that is leading to a whole lot of waste. So the figure is 125 tonnes of office furniture going to recycling and landfill every year, which is about 500 tonnes a day. Can you imagine how much furniture 500 tonnes is? A chair is just 20 kilograms. So it's a hell of a lot of weight. And beyond that, the problem really is fundamentally that manufacturers are all about taking raw materials out of the earth in a virgin state, turning them into a bit of furniture and pumping it out. And of course, if that's your only way to make money, of course, you're going to incentivize everyone in your supply chain to try and do more and more of that with things like fast fashion and various other tricks that linear manufacturers use. It's a broken system. So what we tried to do when we started about 6 years ago is come up with a better model. So on the next slide, I'll show you what that looks like. What we do really is start with understanding customers' requirements, because if we were just in the business of pushing furniture to anyone who wants to buy it, specifically dealers and intermediaries, that would hurt us a lot, because they then can't pass on the same messages or represent the sustainability of what we do particularly well to customers. So we're vertically integrated and we start with customers. We do a free design for a client if they want that. We do a free audit of their existing furniture. And then during that design, in agreement with what they want in terms of the look and feel of the office, we then source the furniture, which comes from 3 different places. Obviously, clients' existing furniture, that's massively financially advantageous to them to do that. There is also a whole world of office clearance out there. Something like 2 million workstations a year are cleared from offices. That gives us a really wonderful source of furniture through the office clearance industry. And frankly, a lot of people offer us free furniture because otherwise it's expensive to send it to landfill. And then finally, we also design our own furniture made from waste materials made by local SMEs and social enterprises like the Merthyr Tydfil Institute for the Blind. We then remanufacture the used furniture, which for us is a quality controlled engineering process. We do that locally, creating local jobs, and we guaranteed to take that furniture back at no cost at the end of its life. That means that actually we're truly a circular company. I don't know of any other company that in the UK that offers to take office furniture back at the end of its life, certainly for free. And then we remanufacture that and obviously provide some sustainability reporting. That model works really well for us. So if we go to the next slide, the benefits of that approach for us is this is not marginal economics. This is massively attractive for all parties. So we have a higher gross margin, for instance, than Herman Miller does, the world's largest furniture manufacturer, and the capital intensity of about a half. I checked their 10K recently. We remanufacture high quality office furniture as new condition. In doing so, that furniture that we sell is 20 to 30% lower than wholesale prices. And if you're looking at the sticker price for a Herman Miller chair, we're about 70 to 80% lower than those recommended retail prices. We're also 80% lower carbon emissions and waste, and we create local jobs for the disadvantaged. And to be clear, our products are a drop-in replacement for new furniture because we are operating at such good quality management systems, and we are genuinely creating that as new state for the furniture. Next slide, please. Wanted to also recognize that there are enormous greenhouse gas emission savings. So this slide shows all of the sources of greenhouse gas emissions over the life cycle of a building, right from when and a building is first built, right through to when the building is then demolished. And if you look at that, you might be surprised at just how big the greenhouse gas emissions in furniture are. And that's because the furniture is typically taken out of a furniture and landfill roughly every 6 to 7 years. So there's a repeating embodied energy that builds up here and makes furniture, in fact, the largest greenhouse gas component within the lifetime of a building. And with remanufacturing, we can save 80% of that. So there's a really good reason, if you're thinking about a building refurbishment or a building estates manager or a procurement person, to think hard about your furniture choices. Next slide, please. So we've done over 250 projects. We've saved millions of pounds, created over 7,000 hours of work for local long-term unemployed people with disabilities. Next slide, thanks. And we've worked for a whole bunch of brands. So I really wanted to impress that what we're doing is not a startup with 5 people and a dog dealing with 3 or 4 pieces of furniture a day. We're dealing in multi-million-pound projects over extended timeframes with some very large customers as well. So things are going pretty well on that front. Next slide, please. I wanted to just show as well, because one of the biggest questions we asked is, well, are there any compromises? Okay, so it's lower cost, we can calculate that. It's lower greenhouse gas emissions footprint, that's somewhat intuitive, lower waste, and we create local jobs. But is there actually a quality compromise? So what I wanted to show at the end of my 5 minutes was some of the projects we've done where we've taken furniture that was used and we've reupholstered it, we've repolished it, we've repowder coated it, we've put new tops on tables, for instance, and the outcome we're showing you in some of these photos. So if we could just flick through these slowly, I might pick up some commentary. There's all sorts of great innovations here in furniture. Let's keep going through these. Yeah, I mean, pretty furniture we've done. So that, if we could pause on this one. So this, for instance, I talked about the use of waste materials when I first started. This is a post-consumer waste plastic tabletop made from old yogurt pots, believe it or not. That transformation occurs in Wales by a wonderful company there called Smile Plastics, and we then transform that into furniture. So this is a beautiful boardroom table that's sitting in, not coincidentally, the offices of the Chartered Institute of Wastes Management, of which some of you may be members. Next slide, please. We've done all sorts of co-working spaces in all sorts of fabrics. Let's keep going. And you can see the furniture looks fabulous. And recently we finished the Transport for Wales head office, where we did the full design of the layout of the furniture as well to create some really interesting spaces. And subsequent to that, we did the Howard de Walden Estates head office, which is in Marylebone, a very, very high-end company, property company with very demanding requirements for quality, including lots of Vitra furniture, which you can see here and on the last slide. So if you're interested in that, we have a monthly newsletter, roughly. It's a bit delayed at the moment, but if you'd like to sign on to that, you can go to our website or click on this QR code. I'll put my details in the chat room. Final slide. Contact details right there, so you can get in contact with us. I'd love to hear from you if you're interested in furniture or circular business models. I'd love to have a chat. Thanks, Fiona.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Greg. That was really inspirational. It's fantastic to see how, you know, the diversity of projects that you're involved with, and also the, you know, the inclusion of that social value, which is obviously so important, but often underrepresented in circular business models. Great. So we have had lots of activity in the chat, lots of different questions. I'm going to try and navigate these as best I can. If you would like to come on the mic and ask a question to any of our speakers personally, please raise your hand. Be happy to bring any of you in. But I'm going to start with a question that's quite broad and touches on the link between circular economy and economic growth. And I know this is a topic that has come up in all 4 of the presentations, but I think, yeah, the question is around kind of how can we evidence that link between circular economy and economic growth. So would any of you like to speak to that first?
Yeah, can I have a crack at that?
Yeah, please.
What I'm finding really disappointing is in this conversation around climate change, everyone is saying, including very disappointingly the governor of the Reserve Bank of England, they're saying that a lower carbon future involves greater costs. And that's just frankly nonsense. If you consider the circular economy, if you're thinking renewable energy, it's barely true in renewable energy. But if you're thinking about a lot of energy efficiency, yes, that involves greater costs. And there are some aspects of life that involve greater costs if you're trying to reduce your carbon emissions, including electric vehicles before they get to scale. But the circular economy seems to be left entirely out of the conversation. And so I think that links to your growth question there, as in, if we believe we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, which many of us do, and we can do that by saving money and also creating social value, isn't that an economic growth driver that we should be prioritizing? And I'm not just talking about furniture, but all aspects of the circular economy.
Yeah, really, really good points. Thank you, Greg. Would any of the other speakers like to respond to that?
If I may comment, I think thanks for the question. There is a phrase that describes the circular economy. Actually, Fiona from the PhD defense, you will recall that the circular economy is about decoupling value creation from resource consumption. And that's where it comes by enabling growth. And growth can be perceived single companies growth or the growth of jobs, sharing wealth, and so forth. And I think it becomes more and more relevant to turn now. Now we are talking, and we saw very good examples of companies well experienced in circular business models. And I think the discussions will start now on the competition on circular business models, and how if the social aspects are not considered, what's being substituted in the competition is that we lost, or we will risk not including certain parts of the society. I just had a very nice example, heard a very nice example here this morning in Denmark, that many municipalities are creating reuse stores that they are sorting and benefiting and valorizing, for instance, electronics and so forth. And they are creating a business, and the business is for profit for municipalities, but it's competing with social driven charities or like Red Cross stores and so forth. And so this discussion appeared about the competition for the circular market, and how if the social aspects are not considered, we might risk substituting or making bad choices in the substitution, and not focusing on the growth for all, but growth for some. So I think it's very relevant, circular economy and growth in general, to be considered together.
Yeah, thanks, Marina. That's, oh, sorry, Bing, you wanted to come in.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, definitely agree that I think in most businesses, they generally want to do the right thing, and I mean, survival is the first priority for most business. And then, but I think there's also needs for a changing mindset when they're making the decision, you know, for example, investment decisions or operational decisions. That I think the cost is definitely a very important element, but there's also a need to bring the nature into the table as well, taking this more seriously. And for example, I mean, I'm just giving the chemical sector as an example. That we know that the chemical sector plays a very important role in the UK economy, create lots of jobs, and then you know, generates lots of values in the economy. But at the same time, it is also the you know, relies on highly linear. It is a linear. It generates substantial amount of emissions, and then there's a lot of the products find their ways into the environment, and it just simply we cannot continue the current business as usual scenario. That we have to move away from that, and moving towards the circular economy is not an option, and but it's an inevitable responses to the growing demand, and then adjusting the emission and sustainable growth.
Thanks, Bing. And this links nicely to a question that's been posed by George. who asked the question, where do circular economy business models offer a competitive advantage over linear models? And I think we've seen some examples of that, but also what national policies are needed to address the points of friction within circular business models so that the majority of the economy moves towards these circular business models as opposed to individual businesses. Would anyone like to respond to that, Greg?
Yeah, let me start that. I think the points, it's interesting when you think about points of friction. I think many of the points of friction are nowadays societal challenges that are not specific to the circular economy. I mean, for example, modern slavery, that is a point of friction in the supply chain that shouldn't be there. So we should be eliminating that. And you can do that if you use distributed remanufacturing within your own domestic market. That means that we're employing your neighbours, or my neighbours in essence. And literally, we seem to be recruiting a lot of High Wycombe at the moment because we've got a new plant there. So a lot of those externalities, let's call some of those points of friction externalities, such as greenhouse gas emissions or waste to landfill, all of those problems are societal issues that are largely a result of our population expanding and some really bad linear economy habits. Those points of friction, and if I come back to the core of the question, which is, well, what policy should you have? Well, let's price those properly. So a carbon trading scheme is very good for us because we reduce carbon. Similarly, the landfill tax, a wonderful bit of British legislation more than a decade ago, said we are going to, because the UK does not have many landfill spaces, therefore we're going to make the price of those increase over time to reflect the shortage. Therefore, what's happened is we get people calling us up saying, hey, right, we've got a whole office full of furniture. It's going to be a lot more expensive than we thought to send it to landfill because of the landfill tax. Why don't you come and take what you like for free? So we're gifted a whole lot of furniture, which is probably the right outcome because that means the preferential treatment of that furniture is to send it to us who can do something useful with it and put it back into the economy rather than sending it to landfill where it's just going to create methane and take up space and cause problems for future generations.
Thanks, Greg. And Phil, did you want to come in on that question?
Only to say I think policy will drive behavioural change. We right now in the UK, we're just about to, the UK government's just about to introduce plastics tax on plastic waste, packaging waste. So certainly in my organisation, I wish I wasn't saying this, but I need to say it. We generate packaging waste, unfortunately, because we quality assure products to such a high degree that we wrap them in plastic. We probably don't need to do so. And so from an engineering perspective, to take that plastic away in a big company, in a large company, is a big challenge because people have staked their reputation from a quality perspective on that packaging needs to be there. So I think if we get legislative change, as in the example I've just given, and Greg gave a great example about landfill tax as well, those types of things change behavioural patterns in consumption, which then forces behavioural changes in production, in essence.
Yeah, great. And Phil, if you wouldn't mind if we stay with you for a few minutes longer, because we've received a few questions. So one from John, who asked, do you recover 700,000 toner bottles a month, or is that a target? Then we've got one from Ravi, who asks, have you explored ways to partner with customers to bring recovery costs more under control?
So that particular toner bottle I showed you, we produce 700,000 of that variety, but we produce many more than that, but of that variety. And we recover probably 25%. To be honest, I wish we recovered a lot more. It's challenging, which kind of leads on to the second part, is how do you engage with partners to recover? So the sort of the geographical dispersion of the business that I was talking about there is EMEA. So when you're trying to recover bottles from Germany, from Sweden, from France, from Spain, it's relatively straightforward. When you're trying to recover them from Egypt, or you're trying to recover them from Romania, it's very complicated, it's very expensive, it's very political, and actually it's very risky to your brand, because the potential for it to go wrong. And so therefore you have to engage with partners. You can't do this on your own. And it's easy engaging with, if we were to engage with ABN AMRO Bank, very simple, because they'll want to do it. You try to engage with some small organization in a disparate location who's got no motivation or interest, then it generally comes down to economics. What will you pay us, Rico, to give you that toner bottle back? And you saw how tight the margins are in that toner bottle.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, you're painting a complex system, and there are lots of different parts that we have to kind of factor in order to develop these business models, and they're constantly moving. And one of the questions from Sego is for Marina and Bing. So he asks, a lot of circular business models are focused on value and associated archetypes and components. Do you have thoughts on circular business models as complex systems, quantifying independent flows, and understanding the required capabilities and institutional context? There's quite a big question there. But essentially, I think we're looking at kind of how we can look at circular business models as complex systems, and how we try to quantify some of these different flows that are associated. Marina, do you want to have a go at that one first?
Yeah, a very nice perspective. In the end, that's what they are, complex systems. And I think Bing brought that as well. They are complex systems and not archetypes. Archetypes is an easy way to get the conversations going and start the movement for the transitions, but definitely the systemic perspective and analysis, they have to be in place. Otherwise, coming back to the point I mentioned before, when you start shifting something to make a part of the change to become more circular, if you are not taking into perspective the wider considerations of sustainability, the social aspects, not only economic and the material environmental side, you could be creating disruptions or worsening how the systemic picture works. And I think I brought here this conflict, or this nice dialogue that is coming up now in Denmark with the reused stores of municipalities versus the charities. But as well, I've seen more and more companies entering into the market or exploring to become better in the market of providing recycled materials, like big companies working on that for a long while. And maybe in certain countries where you already have cooperatives or other sources of actors, building that infrastructure to a good level of recyclability of certain materials like cardboard, up to 80% in certain countries, relying on cooperatives. When big players enter to steal the market for the recycling, if it's not well thought, if it's not systemically, not only considering the environmental aspects, but also considering the social aspects, maybe the substitutions could be leading us to places that end up worse than before, to certain perspectives. So I definitely think it's a matter of a systemic and not archetypes.
Yeah, some really good examples, Marina, of how we all need to be working together to bring about this change at the level of the economy as opposed to the level of the business.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question, and then thanks so much for the answer, Marina, as well. So I couldn't agree more with what you said. So just actually really coming back to our case study around Unilever's one, we've seen that within this ecosystem, I mean, this obviously this newly formed ecosystem. One thing that we want to highlight is that definitely that for this circular business model to work in the long run or in a large scale, that one thing that we have find out is that there's a need to have a fair distribution of the value being captured within the ecosystem, and then and how can we ensure those value being transferred into different parties? I think that's very important aspect. And obviously this is the next research question that we're gonna carry out more, because we've seen that obviously that most of the value being captured, or the lion's share of the value being captured on one party, whereas in this case at Unilever, they have to absorb most of the cost, and both financially, and also that the environmental or sustainability, they haven't been able to claim much as well. So this is something that we want to research a bit more next. And then the other question around the capabilities, and I think this is another question that we've also interviewed for within our key research question, that to what extent the business have the the capability to scale up or to actually implement those changes. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Bing. And Greg, did you want to come in on that question?
No, thank you.
No, okay. And another really good question from Marie around financing. So she asked, what has been your experience of externally financing or gaining funding for circular economy business models? And maybe, Greg, this is a question that you
thank
can
you.
respond to.
We've just finished a financing round, and hello to, there's a couple of shareholders in the group already. Hello, Catherine, how are you doing? Who invested in early rounds. Yeah, it's really interesting. So if I got a beer mat and developed a app model that does something around energy efficiency or taxis or quickly securing groceries for people, on a beer mat, I'd be able to raise a couple of £1 million. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And here we have a business that's 6.5 years old. It's earning in the millions every year. It's profitable and has been since day one. And we put that in front of investors who are investing in ridiculous beer mat ideas. And they go, oh, we're not really sure. You need to tick a few more boxes, and you need another year's run time, and you need to prove that it's a repeatable market and all this sort of stuff. And we say, well, hang on a minute. What about the guys that you're giving all the millions to? I think, oh, that's a different model. And so what we're seeing is that there are a lot of investors out there who have really strong tick lists that they have to achieve as part of their investment mandates, which is not helping investing in the circular economy at all, right? So that's actually a real problem for us. But there's little you can do. And what we're hoping is that now the world is recognizing the importance of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and obviously in our case, we're a large part of a building's greenhouse gas emissions. We're hoping that investors will start to put two and two together. And to be fair, there's some funds that are set up only for circular economy. So the Circularity Capital, many of you might know Jamie and the guys in Edinburgh based doing that. Also, there's a Circular Value Fund and a Circular Asia Fund and a couple of other funds who've met along the way. So the money's starting to slowly recognise the potential of the circular economy. That doesn't make it any easier to raise funding, unfortunately. So hopefully in the coming years, it'll get easier. And we believe that just as technology was a really big investment for the last decade or so, we think the circular economy has a huge potential there, but it's just not recognised in the eyes of investors. And remember, I mean, 20 years ago, well, 10 years ago, I was working in, no more than that, 20 years ago, I was working in renewable energy, and I went to the investment funds for pension funds and all sorts of people. And I said, hey, you guys should be investing in renewable energy. And they went, oh, no, it's not investable. It's too small. It'll never come to anything. And now those same funds are putting ridiculously large amounts of money into renewables. And in fact, they've missed the market, right? I mean, if you try and build a wind farm right now, it's a ridiculously poor proposition in terms of return because everyone wants a part of that. So, of course, investment markets are naturally conservative, so they follow behind. So I think that's where we are in the circular economy at the moment.
Great, thanks, Greg, and thanks for the question, Murray. Bing, I don't know whether you, with your finance background, wanted to comment on that.
Yes, this is really interesting question, and we haven't done a lot of work around financing channels yet, but this is something that we're going to continue working from next year. But based on what we find out, and just shocking numbers, that I think around we got this really nice pie chart there, and then really highlight from comparison of linear versus circular corporate spending. So I think it's around 2% of the funding goes to the is 800 billion versus 35,400 billion goes to linear model. So to just give you an idea. And then we can clearly see that the circular economy financing market is taking off. That we've got more and more like business and finances, so they buying into this. And however, it's just the scale and speed is not enough. It's too small. So yeah, and this is the something that we would urgently to look into. How can we mobilize private investment and further?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your answers. And I think, as Catherine points out, BlackRock now have a circular economy fund, which is positive. But yeah, we need more and quicker. So many questions, and unfortunately, we're not going to get through them all. One last one that caught my eye for Phil. And Paul asks you, Phil, is it possible to build the capacity to recover and remanufacture locally? And I think we see that this a lot, don't we, with remanufacture in particular, that a lot of things in the UK are imported, and therefore we don't have that logical reverse logistics supply chain set up to remanufacture. So is this something that you're looking at?
Yeah, so we remanufacture in the UK, we remanufacture in France, I would say we refurbish rather than remanufacture. Remanufacture to me is back to original specification. Refurbish we do in probably 6 or 8 countries. And principally the driver around it is logistics cost, in essence. I showed you an example of toner bottles today, very small, very light. I could have showed you an example of a photocopier, very large, very heavy, totally different cost model around those. But yes, it is, absolutely. And transport costs are going through the roof for everybody. So the advantages of being able to do things in the marketplace have never been greater. Thank goodness.
Thank you. Great answer. And thank you all so much for your really inspirational presentations and responses to the questions. Thank you all for joining us today. Some really challenging questions in the chat, and yeah, obviously a lot of interest in this topic. If you wouldn't mind taking 2 minutes to feed back to us on these events, we're always trying to improve and look at what other events and webinars you might like to see. So I've popped the link to that in the chat. As part of the hub, if you want to keep in touch with us, please visit our website where you can sign up to our newsletter. We also have a number of stories around circular economy that we release each month to try and give you a more diverse perspective on all of the different activities that is taking place across the circular economy landscape. But yeah, just wanted to say one last time, thank you for joining us, and thank you very much to our speakers for a really inspirational discussion, and hope to see you all again soon at our forthcoming events. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.